Hello Year 10. This is one of a series of videos I'm going to make for you to help you get through the poetry anthology while we are not at school. They'll be useful for you in terms of revision next year as well. And I'll start with the ones we haven't done yet and then hopefully go through others so that you can revise them, the ones that we've already covered. Okay, so this is The Man He Killed, written by Thomas Hardy, around about the turn of the 20th century, when the 19th century became the 20th century, and you can see there it's about the Boer War, which was taking place in what we nowadays call South Africa, and these are roughly the dates. So it wasn't called South Africa at the time, but this is the area that we now think of as South Africa. And this is a war between two colonial powers, between the British and between Dutch settlers who'd settled in the area a decade or two before. So we've got two Western European nations sending empire forces essentially to somewhere a very long way away in order to settle that area, primarily because they wanted the resources that South Africa's land had within it. So people, often slaves initially, and then by this time it's not so much slaves, but it is cheap labour. Diamonds and gold and coal, particularly the case for South Africa, and land, of course, cheap land to grow things. So we have this idea that two Western European nations who are really physically very close together geographically, just the English Channel separating them, have both travelled thousands of miles that would have taken weeks on a ship because, of course, it's pre-aeroplane travel. And they're fighting over land that has nothing to do with them, really. It's not land they've inherited, it's just land they fancy because it's got good resources in it. Hardy, the writer, didn't like this. He thought this war was a bad idea. He felt that it was an unjust war, that it wasn't one that the British should be involved in. And who by this time, he's quite a popular, well-known writer. So he has a certain influence, and he decides that he's going to use his influence to write a poem to try and get the message across to people in the country who were mostly supportive of the war, that actually we shouldn't be doing this, it wasn't something we needed to become involved in. And therefore he writes this poem. It's written, like several other poems in the group, in the ballad form. We know it's a ballad because it has repeated 4-line stanzas, it's got a strong rhythm, it's got a regular rhyme scheme, and it tells a story. These are the 4 ingredients of a ballad. So like some of the other ballads in the group, it very much fits this form. Excuse me. In this poem, Hardy adopts the persona of a very ordinary soldier. So it's like some of our other persona poems, and we can see that because if you look, it's got speech marks to show us that somebody's talking. It's like a dramatic monologue. So Poison Tree and Cousin Kate and War Photographer and Poppies, which we haven't yet studied, are all poems where the writer writes in the first person, but they're not talking as themselves. They've kind of put on this character. And this is the character that Hardy adopts here, a very ordinary, not particularly well educated, not powerful man who is an ordinary soldier, these days we'd probably call a squaddy. In those days, just an ordinary member of the infantry, the walking regiment, as opposed to people who rode on horseback or similar. So this is a person who has no power and who doesn't really have any economic power either. And Hardy wants to get across the idea that this person who has been working as a soldier and has fought in this war is thinking about one particular person that was an enemy whom he killed on the battlefield and trying to justify and think about the reasons why this happened. In keeping with this very ordinary persona, Hardy adopts a very simple style of language. The language in the text is mostly single syllable. It's very straightforward, easy words, It's often quite colloquial. Colloquial means slang. So the word nipperkin, for example, is slang for a shot of brandy or whiskey. And he uses this for two reasons. Excuse me. One, because it fits the persona. This character is supposed to be uneducated. He's supposed to not really have huge articulate skills. So that language fits this person. And also, it means that there's no one that reads this poem who would find it hard to understand, because the language is straightforward. So Hardy can get as many people as possible reading his poem, understanding its message, and perhaps being able to be persuaded by his argument. On to actually looking at the poem itself now. You can see that it starts off, this first stanza has a very cheerful tone. It's fairly light-hearted. We've got that exclamation mark at the end, which sort of enhances the cheerful tone. And we have this idea that he's thinking about a parallel life. If only we'd met under different circumstances, I bet me and this chap I shot would have got on beautifully. Even though we didn't necessarily speak the same language, we have a lot of cultural closeness. And I bet we'd have liked each other. We'd have sat ourselves down in the pub and we'd have had a load of shots together, he says. And then we've got this keyword but, the connective that tells us there's going to be a change in direction. And he says, but ranged as infantry and staring face to face, I shot at him as he at me and killed him in his place. So infantry are the foot soldiers. These are our squaddies. Ranged as infantry, what Hardy is talking about is having sort of two lines of soldiers facing each other. And there's a suggestion here that if our soldier, our persona, hadn't done the shooting, hadn't killed his enemy, the enemy would have shot him. And this message here, the change in tone, the change in punctuation from an exclamation mark to a full stop, all tell us that the attitude is different in the second stanza. The first stanza we've said is cheerful. The second stanza is much more, it's a bold message. It's very clear. It's not trying to sugarcoat it. It's not trying to make it nicer or sanitize it in any way. It's a very strong, uneuphemistic statement here. I shot at him as he at me and killed him in his place. In the third and fourth stanza, we get a certain amount of explanation and justification by Hardy's character. It's almost as if someone said to him, well, why did you shoot him? You could almost imagine somebody speaking in between. And then he gives his answer. I shot him dead because he was my foe. Just so. My foe, of course he was. Well, although he gives an answer, the hesitation here, indicated by the dash, and the repetition of because, as though he's having a little think, tells us that the persona isn't quite sure why he shot the other chap, other than he was told to. And then we have the internal rhyme here, and here, and here, foe, so, foe, although, which really reinforces the message to us. Foe is repeated twice, but it's kind of almost as if he can't quite otherwise articulate his reasons. Well, I was told to do it, he was my enemy, he'd have shot me. I don't really have anything more to say than that, he says. And then we've got, at the end of the third stanza, we've got the first little bit of enjambment. So it's end stopped, but now it's enjambed. And although you can almost sense the character having a little think, going a bit deeper into what he imagines the other chap to have been like. I shot him dead because he was my foe, just so, my foe, of course he was, that's clear enough. Although, and you can almost sense him starting to create a backstory for his enemy here. He thought he'd enlist, perhaps, list is enlist, join up, perhaps. offhand-like, and offhand makes it sound quite spontaneous. Just as I was out of work, had sold his traps. No other reason why. So here in this fourth stanza, in this creation of the reason why perhaps the other chap enlisted, these are not conscripted soldiers, these are volunteered. It's before soldiers were made to join up like they were in the First World War. They volunteered. But let's have a look at why they might have volunteered. Well, they've lost their job. They haven't really thought about it so much. Everything they owned that had any value, they have sold. So they've got no money coming in, potentially nowhere to live, no way of paying their rent, no way of eating. And the army provides them with those things. So for the poor, it was a good career, if you like, an opportunity to make some money, not have to worry about where to live or how you're going to pay your landlord or any of that things. But it wasn't. This word here, offhand-like, suggests it wasn't really thought through that seriously. We didn't actually think about having to kill other people. And then you've got the final stanza, which is kind of quite musing in tone. He's having a little think, yes, quaint and curious war is. How strange war is, he says. And again, we've got this exclamation mark to add a bit of power to that statement. Although quaint and curious doesn't sound particularly angry, the exclamation mark perhaps gives a hint at that. You shoot a fellow down, you treat of men where any bar is, or help to half a crown. And we've got here a sort of cyclical structure. It goes round in a circle. So it begins with talking about maybe we've met at the pub, we'd have been mates, and it ends with talking about the pub again. If I met him, I'd buy him, and I was near a pub, I'd buy him a drink. Or perhaps I'd give him some money if he was down on his luck, he says. So it goes round in a circle, doesn't it? It's called the cyclical structure. So this line here is one of the most important lines here. Yes, quaint and curious war is. You've got the persona kind of musing this idea of war as futile, this idea of the pointlessness of war, and that is one of our key lines for me. And I think also this section here is also key because it just sort of tells us that he didn't really have a reason. So this poem goes well with exposure, because exposure is very much about pointlessness and futility of war, isn't it? So it goes very well with that one. It goes well with Poison Tree, because they're both in the ballad form and they both have this message for a reader. It contrasts quite well with Sennacherib and Charge, because these are poems that sort of, particularly Charge, deal with bravery of war and the bravery of sacrifice, and how it's gallant and splendid to be in war. And this one very much disagrees with that, doesn't it, and seems to say that war is, well, it says war is quaint and curious, and these days we might say how ridiculous and pointless it is.